I'm a music lover too, and one thing I see all the time online is this a music room or a movie room?
Yeah.
I never have kind of understood that question, because I feel like if you build the right room, you treat it properly, you have the design done, and then of course you have it tuned, your music should be great and your movie should be great.
The last time we toured Jay's home theater, it was impressive. But since then, he's taken it to a whole new level. We're talking a complete transformation. A 9.4.4 Revel system, 4 18-inch subwoofers from Power Sound Audio and Dayton Audio, a custom-built hush box for his JVC NZ9, JBL synthesis processing, Buckeye amplifiers, Kaleidescape, and that's just scratching the surface. So grab a drink and your favorite snack as we dive deep into room design, noise floor, acoustics, and calibration. I want to give a huge thank you to our sponsors, Bison HTA, Michael Frank's Design Company, Buckeye Amps, and the Screening Room AV for making this tour possible. Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we're in an incredible room. I was actually here in Jay's home theater about 5 years ago. You were one of the first in that home theater tour that I did in Florida. I think I did about 10 different theaters. But Jay, almost everything has changed over the past 5 years. And so I'm super pumped. It was great then, but you've taken this to a whole new level.
Yep, a lot has changed. I think we were talking earlier, the only thing that is the same is the Stewart screen and the processor that I'm using, the SDP55 from JBL. Pretty much everything else has been redesigned and reinstalled, upgraded, speakers, amps, the projector itself, just seating, everything from top to bottom. The subwoofers were the same as well, Michael, but everything else has been upgraded. So,
but this is like a new experience. I mean, this is way different. Yours was great before, but like I said, it was awesome just experiencing just a whole new level. We're going to talk about all of your home theater. I'm really excited to dive into this because I want to bring everybody along your journey, because this has been a long process. You've been in this home for like 18 years.
18 years, yeah.
I've been in my home 18 years, and we didn't get to this point in day one.
Right.
And I've always shared that this is a journey, and I love sharing people's journey. And so I just think it's going to be a fun conversation, man. So let's first start off, how big is your room? Because I want you guys to be able to kind of visualize the space that we've got here. What are we working with?
So the room is 12.5 feet wide by 22 feet long with 8-foot ceilings. The room is built over a garage, so technically it's a bonus room in the middle of the attic. So we do have some knee walls, angled knee walls, but yeah, those are the general dimensions. I think it's around 224 square feet.
Okay.
So
nice. So great space. We've got 2 rows of seating. We'll talk about all that. So while we're standing up front, so let's talk about the screen, and we'll talk projector first. What do we got going on here?
So this is a 110-inch 16:9 Stewart Studio Tech micro perf 130, and so was running. I think when you were here the last time, I was actually the same screen. I had just changed it as you got here, and so. Yeah, I got this screen because of the gain. I mean, I wanted to be able to have the highest output or the highest light output I could for the HDR content. And I was running, it was one of the, was it the Elite screen before? I think it was one of the budget screens, which worked fine for a number of years. I really enjoyed having the room, but the screen just made a huge impact. And of course, I love audio as well, and I wanted to be able to have a transparent screen so I could run the 3 towers, and which I had before in the Polk Audio setup, but the Revels have just kind of upped the game, the Salon 2s.
Yeah.
So I needed a transparent screen as well, and I chose the kind of the reference screen at this point in the industry, the Stewart Studio Tech.
So what is the gain on this one?
That's 1.3 gain. Okay. So, but I think measured it's about 1.1, 1.2 gain. So
ideally, having a higher gain just allows you to get more output from the projector. You're not losing as much light. In my setup, mine's a 0.8, so I'm technically losing some output a little bit. And so that allows you to get more, just that more vibrance from your image. And having a, not so massive screen, if you had a 200-inch screen, that would help even more because, hey, that's a big, big image to fill. And so you're getting a huge, huge amount of light here. Beautiful image on this. some people will go with perf. So that's, I can see, we got holes in your screen. And then like in mine, I've got a weave. Is there a reason why you went with a perf?
I did. So first of all, I think I really wanted that 1.3 gain for the light output. And so after consulting with Zach over at the screening room, I ordered screen material. I bought had four different screens. Zach helped coordinate that for me. And I taped them on my old screen.
Yeah.
And
like samples?
Yeah,
maybe?
samples, like small samples of the screens from Stewart, from we were talking yours earlier today.
Seymour.
Yes, Seymour. So I actually had samples sent of the major screens that I was considering, taped them on there, did a bunch of watching on a Saturday, and kind of landed on the Stewart. And I was worried about seeing the perf, because that can be a distraction as you're, watching content.
Right.
But at about 9.5 feet, when I moved a little bit forward, I could see it.
Okay.
But from around 9.5 to now I'm at 11 feet based on the new room design, I definitely don't see it at 11 feet anymore. And I really only saw glimpses of it at 9.5 feet when it was really bright white scenes, high knit, a lot of bright scenes. So you may notice it then, but yeah, that's why I chose the micro perf.
Sure.
And I didn't want to compromise on audio. I know that it's always a little bit of a compromise, and I think you'll meet Jeff Mary, the tuner for the room, and he spent a lot of time tuning the center channel, because it's the speaker that's behind the screen here. And so that always somewhat of a compromise, but nothing that can't be corrected with room correction and tuning. So.
And I hear people say that. They're like, you're compromising. I tell you what, I would much rather have my center channel, or even all three of them, behind a screen than to put it way below or way above. My brain can compensate, and especially room correction and calibration can easily compensate for that slight dip in the upper attenuation that it's kind of removing. You can easily adjust that in EQ, and so to me that's not a big compromise at all. But I love the fact that we've got the center channel anchored directly behind there. A couple other things I'd love to talk about here. So you chose 16:9. I know that's a big decision for people. I had that and I struggled with it. Do I go scope, like a 2.350 or 240? Do I go 16:9? What was your decision behind that?
Ultimately, Michael, it's mixed content viewing for me. A lot of sporting events, a lot of regular TV with the family and stuff. And so I'd say probably 50% movies, 50% television. And then I just use the room for music a lot, because I love listening to 2-channel music.
Sure,
so,
and concerts. We listened to a bunch of that earlier.
My decision was pretty much solely based on the fact that we still watch a lot of normal TV up here, not just movie content. So, and I think in the first time around I showed you there's a masking panel, but you can actually, if you help me out.
Let's take a look at this.
So we can actually mask this screen down to a scope screen by just hanging this masking panel on the screen. And so I'm using a Lumagen processor. That was an upgrade that I worked with Chris Deering on. And so he pushes the image to the bottom and masks the top.
Yeah.
So then you have a scope screen, not quite as large, but for serious movie watching, it works well. So
this is DIY, right?
Yep, that's a DIY masking panel. It's actually, I think it's 4mm or corrugated plastic, and then I've got a 1x2 nailed to the top of it. And it just literally just hangs on the top of the screen.
It's like just a lip on the top.
Yeah.
So that's a super easy way of affordable, because we know electronic masking gets way, way expensive.
Yes.
So being able to do something like this, and the couple of benefits of doing this isn't just to get rid of the gray bars. This actually, our brains perceive more contrast when we have a total black area here. You don't have those gray bars. So by doing that, you're improving your image quality in this as well.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of the impetus behind the hood on the ceiling and the side walls, all done in triple black velvet, about 3 feet out from the screen. It just creates kind of like a floating image in a completely dark environment. So very impactful. And there's a picture floating around the internet of 2 screens, one with the masking around and one without. And the on-screen contrast is unreal with the triple black velvet versus the room not having it. So
yeah. I was talking with Chris Seymour, and he was explaining how important masking is. Your brain perceives a boost in contrast, and so your image just pops so much more the blacker you can get this. And I love the fact that your room still has character, your room still has color, it has depth. You didn't make a void room. I've seen some of those, and that's cool.
A black hole concept.
Yeah, just a black hole where everything is velvet. But you made the decision to, you know what, we're going to darken this whole area up here. We're going to extend this on the floor because even your carpet can reflect light. Ceiling can reflect light. Sidewalls can reflect light. So I love what you've done here, and that's like super inexpensive, DIY kind of thing. You just buy some fabric. What color was it? The velvet. It
was just the triple black velvet on Amazon.
Yeah, triple black velvet. Sometimes that's hard to find, you know, depending on their stock. But this just makes this, your brain focuses on the image. And that's what you want to do. No distractions there. So I love what you've done with the screen. So let's talk projector, because that's going to tie hand in hand with the image. What projector did you come from? Because I know you've done some upgrades over the years. And what are you rocking now?
Wow, this is, I think, my 5th or 6th projector in the room in 18 years.
I know, me too.
So I started out with the Mitsubishi HD 1000U. It was the first 720 projector in the residential. And today I'm running a JVC NX9. And so I think the last time you were here, I had an NX7. And again, working, you know, staying in contact with the screening room and stuff, I landed a deal on a closeout NX9, and just the brightness and the image quality. I think it's hitting about 116 nits in high lamp mode on this particular screen at a throw distance of about a little over 11 feet. So. And just love the NX9. It's just an amazing projector. It's one with the 100mm lens, so it can achieve a much greater light output than the previous generations. Loved the NX7, and even before that, I had the RS540. And so love those projectors. But been to a lot of shows, attended a lot of events, and just love the deep blacks of the JVC and the contrast, and a lot of great projectors on the market, but I think JVC was the one for me. So.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful image. And again, you've got this perfectly paired with an incredible screen. Stuart makes some of the best screens on the market. And just to being able to combine the light output that you want, your recommended throw distance for this size screen, getting it as close as you can to maximize that output. That's just a great combination. I love what you've done there. Absolutely beautiful on that.
One thing I've added since you were here last time is an external tone mapping processor. So I'm running the Lumagen 4242.
Okay.
I did that through Chris Deering, and he did the calibration on the projector as well. So I think before, when you were here, I probably had the MadVR set up on a PC running the software, but kind of got tired of maintaining that and just finally bit the bullet and bought an outboard tone mapping processor.
So for those that don't know what tone mapping, like, let's make it simple. What's that doing for your image? What is the Lumagen providing?
Well, I think that the tone mapping capabilities of the projectors are pretty good. And they've improved a lot over the years. I think JVC, just based on, you know, research and attendance to the shows and hearing what they're working on, all the projector companies have increased their tone mapping, but it still can't match or rival what a TV or, you know, another display, HDR display device can do. So what happens is, the external processor, you know, has its own CPU and processing capabilities, and can map all of those colors into a color space that the projector can display. And so that's what we do with, I think it's the Rec 2020 color space, but an SDR signal going to the projector from the tone mapping device, from the Lumagen. So. And it just does a much better at tone mapping than the actual native projector's tone mapping. So, although there's significant improvements in that area, especially recently from Epson and Sony and even JVC. So,
well, one thing that you've done, and I want to step over here and take a really close look at this, because this is a new product on the market. I'd love to talk about your hush box and what that can offer to a consumer.
So one of the things that you're going to learn today throughout this video is that the noise floor in my room was pretty obnoxious. And what I mean by that is I had Jeff Mary here tune the room before, And when he did that, I had a really good audio report with the exception of the room itself, the noise floor.
Right.
We've done a lot of work on the acoustic treatments and the plan for that, even significant changes from when you were here last time. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that bugged me to no end out of that report was the noise floor of the room.
Okay.
So we were having 3 primary contributions to a higher noise floor. The AC system in the room and this floor was the 18-year-old system when I built the house.
Original AC.
Original AC system, and so the vents or the registers over time had loosened up and were rattling. Even when the air was just blowing through and no sound in the room, you could hear the register in the back. And then the other big contribution to the noise floor was the projector itself, because it was hanging right over your head. Mm-hmm. And it was in high lamp mode. So during silent scenes, that are supposed to be silent scenes, you could hear the fan from the projector. Yeah. And so that's what Jeff had documented in the as the output of one of the items in my report. So I actually contacted the local HVAC vendor that I work with for the house and told them about the problem. And he said, well, Jay, weren't we planning on replacing that unit soon anyway? And I said, yes. So they came in and they installed a new AC system, and they upgraded the size of the trunk in the attic, the trunk line, to make it bigger, and also added another register behind you here. Right. When they did that, and they also installed a variable speed blower motor, that was the biggest impact probably, because even you can feel the air running in the room right now, but you can't hear it. Right. It's dead silent from an AC perspective. So that was a significant contribution to the noise floor. And Jeff even showed me the before noise floor and then the after, and he gave it to me in a picture so you can see at what frequencies the noise has reduced over time.
Yeah, I
and
think
then
the red line was your original, and then the green line, I believe, was the new one, right?
Yeah, I think so. And so you'll see that it made a huge impact. But the other big contributor to that was working with Michael Frank's design company to install the hush box. Yeah. And so these hush boxes, it's a new product on the market that Michael's designed and really fits a need that a lot of higher end rooms have, which is the projector right there above you and you hear it. And so people that are chasing the ultimate noise floor would certainly want to consider being able to run their projector on high lamp or high laser to get the benefits of light output, but also be able to not hear the projector. And so that was huge. So Michael has been working on this, and he actually flew to Florida, and in a weekend we installed the hush box, and I think we can share the measurements, the before and after measurements of the hush box. But I think those 2 items, significantly reduced the amount of noise in the room with nothing playing. And it actually uncovered another.
It's like you fix one thing and you find out another.
You fix these 2, and then all of a sudden we hear something very low key back in the rack that we didn't hear before because of the AC
Everything
and the hush
else is
box.
hiding that.
And so now I've got another issue to address, but I've got some ideas to work through that as well, like moving the rack outside the room into the office, or either putting a glass door on the front of the rack and ventilating the rack from the attic. So going to be doing that in the future. So
it's interesting that you're chasing this low noise floor, and I didn't really understand this until just recently. I flew to Dallas and had an opportunity to film probably a multi-million-dollar theater room, and they were chasing that, and they explained to me how much impact that can have on your overall experience, because once you lower the noise floor in the room, you get rid of, like you said, any noise that's coming in, whether it's an AC, whether it's whatever, your projector, audio rack, your equipment, all of those things increase the noise. And by increasing the noise, when you're watching a movie, you miss out on some of those subtle nuances that are happening, maybe in your Atmos channels, or maybe in your surrounds, or your dialogue in your front center or your left. And so by lowering that as low as you can get it, it enhances that sound. And so that's something that I think a lot of people don't realize, that maybe I ought to consider that when I'm looking at designing a room, or even taking a room that's already built. This wasn't a start from scratch. You didn't have the ability to design the room. This was just a room, and you're like, man, I'm gonna make a cool space out of this.
That's one of the things. So I know Jeff will correct me if I'm wrong on this, but having the noise floor lower increases the room's dynamic range capabilities, right? So
cool.
like when we were watching, I think it was John sitting in the center seat and you could hear the footsteps across the sand in Dune. Yeah. You know, that's not something that you're going to pick up on a room that has a lot of noise already and stuff. Just a little subtle sounds and, intimate, direction and stuff that you hear. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of content in movies that people don't know about that the directors intentionally put there, but you may not hear it depending on the room. So that was what I was chasing. And of course, when Jeff did the first tune and put that in, he gives you a full report of, everything about the room, the verification of the physical location of everything, the sound, before and after measurements and everything. And so that was one thing that was bugging me in that report that I felt like I had to address. Plus, I was going to be replacing the AC system anyway. And so I think probably one of my most favorite upgrades, though, is the hush box, because I don't hear the projector at all anymore, and I think it looks really nice rather than having the mount that used to get the cobwebs around it and your really expensive projector hanging there on the ceiling. That's one of my favorite upgrades recently that I've done. So,
well, I'd love this. Let's step over there. Let's take a look at this, because I think there's some elements of a hush box, and some of you may have never even heard the term hush box. So I'd love to dive into that, because that's not super common in a lot of people's home theater. So let's take a look at that. All right, Jay, so we're standing in front of what's called a hush box, and a lot of you may not be familiar with this. So I wanted to kind of dive into this, because I don't know if I've ever really had a deep conversation regarding a hush box. And so kind of walk us through what this is, where you got it from, and then there's some cool stuff going on inside as well.
Yes, certainly. So in the effort, chasing the noise floor, I mentioned that we had the projector hanging from the ceiling right above my seated position. So high lamp mode was a nuisance. And so the premise of this is to surround the projector in an enclosure that is actively cooled to keep the projector running properly, but also suppress the sound of the lamp. So I run high lamp mode in this projector, or laser, high lamp mode in this projector, and it was very audible during quiet scenes in movies and what have you. So I worked with Michael Frank's design company. Mike Franks is a good friend of mine. He also wanted to address the same issue in his room. A lot of these are born out of necessity. A lot of these types of products are born out of necessity. And so Michael has designed working directly with JVC. They actually sent him an NZ9 or an NZ900 unit so that he could test with. Working directly with them, he designed an enclosure that can be mounted on your ceiling, and there's all kinds of options. You work with Mike directly to be able to figure out what's best for your room. He's got several models available, but you work directly with Mike, and he designed an enclosure that houses the projector and keeps it quiet and cooled in this room. So several huge benefits of having this hush box in the room. Number one is noise suppression from the projector itself, but this particular model is actively cooled and exhausting the heat that is generated from the projector that used to be coming into my room. Right. It's pulling the heat from the box into and dumping it outside of the room. Okay, so there's it's going up into your attic basically. Yep, it goes in my attic. It's got ducting. It's connected to an inline fan that is it's an AC Infinity setup, and it uses a temperature probe inside the box to monitor the temp, and then it can gradually increase fan speed, or it can reduce fan speed based on the internal temperature of the box. So it's heat reduction as well as sound suppression for the projector itself. That was a huge thing in my theater room. I didn't even know what a hush box was at that point. So I moved mine outside of the room. And that was the biggest thing I noticed, is the heat and the noise. That was just tremendous. So this solves that, and it creates, you really don't have the option of putting this outside the room. You got a double door here. What are you going to do with that? So this is a great solution to those that want to reduce that noise. And again, look, we're talking 4 feet here. Yeah. That's not very far. You would absolutely hear this. The rear row would hear this. And so being able to hide that in a beautiful enclosure, I think they've done a great job with this.
what I can't see on the front, is there a glass piece in front, or is that
There's
open?
not. It's open, but it's designed to be just around the lens. So it does seal the front of the projector in the box as well, so that you don't, in this particular version, you don't have any noise from the front either. One thing I love about working with Mike is just, Michael Frank's design company is a custom designer and builder, fabricator.
Yeah.
And so his attention to detail is ludicrous. Like, if you were to look on the inside of this box and see the channels and how it's set up, even the one concern about a hush box is, how do you get the projector perfectly level?
Correct.
Because a lot of the mounts come, with the ceiling mounts, they have, all the different types of tilt. And so he designed the box where you use a large Allen, Allen wrench, and you can adjust all 4 independent points
on
here.
the inside.
Yeah, and adjust the inside of the box.
Nice.
The other thing that's a really cool thing about the box is he also worked not only with JVC directly, but with Dynamat. And they make a special product designed for these applications for noise suppression. And so he's got, the inside of the box is covered in Dynamat to help also reduce noise. And so now I understand that not everybody has the ability to get above the projector in their attic and run the ductwork. So he's also has designed and built a self-contained, actively cooled box as well, that will take air in from the room and then exhaust it back into the room. So you may lose a little bit of the heat reduction in that design, but you're still getting the noise suppression from the box itself. So
yeah, very cool. And it even has, I see you got serial 000 numero uno. So you got the very first one. That's super cool to know that. And he's got a nice little plaque here that says crafted exclusively for Jay Waller.
Yeah, and this isn't a product that Mike's going to hang on a website and you just go and order it, right? I mean, this really requires collaboration with his company to be able to understand the application, understand which box is best for you based on the ability to have it installed. But the premise behind his hush box design is that the owners can, working with a buddy over the weekend, after they figure out exactly what they need from Mike, they can install it themselves, and that's the goal. Even the base plate, Michael, that's attached to the ceiling is pre-drilled for the different, 16-inch on-center studs, 24-inch, everything's pre-drilled. So once you understand, this one happens to be in a bonus room, so the trusses are 24 inches apart, and guess what? He aligned it, and it hit the stud like the first time, so it's pre-drilled for all that, trying to make it easy on the the consumer that's installing it. Now, in my case, I was lucky enough to have Mike here in person, and so he came down and we did it over a weekend. Once we had the hush box installed, he kind of started picking on me about all the little other little things in the room aesthetically that we wanted to improve. But his primary reason to come down was to hang out and install the hush box. And
I'd seen pictures online, but this is really cool in person. The other question that some of you may have is, this of course was made for a JVC NZ900 or NZ9, pretty much the same chassis there. Has he made some for other brands? Is he looking to do that? If somebody had maybe
there has been a lot of interest from people that have seen, these hush boxes, and I think he actually sent one to Colorado for the screening room to have on display for their recent projector shootout. And there is a lot of interest, and I think that he has probably reached out to the manufacturers, and it just takes time for him to get one of their projectors in-house and kind of redesign the box to accommodate the different. But I do know there's a lot of interest, and of course if there's a market for it, Mike will do it. Mike's company's not just a hush box company. I mean, he builds enclosures for speakers and almost anything custom that you can think of. I mean, the guy has a CNC in his basement, so he can cut perfect dimensions for everything, and just really is custom designer in general. Just happens to be a home theater hobbyist as well. So
I love it. We'll definitely have his information down in the description and a pinned comment. So if you guys are interested in that, definitely hit him up. This is super cool. All right, Jay, so I want to talk acoustic treatment. What I see in a lot of people when they're building their room out, and even myself included, sadly, this is one of the last things that we think about. We like to get bigger, better speakers. If our center channel doesn't sound that great, we think it's just, you know, a performance issue. So we want to buy bigger, better. Maybe we want to add more speakers. That's not a good thing. Adding more speakers doesn't solve a problem. So acoustic treatment is super, super critical. So I'd love to talk through what you've chosen for your room. I love the style and design, but these have really great functionality to them. So walk me through that.
Yeah, so one of the questions you asked me during the first filming of the room was, what was one thing that you would change going back? Yeah. Well, and I think first of all, the answer to that, there's two big answers. I had an untreated room forever, and it was truly an echo chamber in this room. And so I did not realize how fatiguing that was on the ears over time, especially if you're a person that likes to listen at loud volumes like I do. And so that would definitely, you know, wear me out by the end of a movie. And so I would probably, step one, I would get a professional room design done. And see, this is not an engineered room that was designed from bottom up, you know, for the purpose that it serves today. Yeah. But even not having an engineered room, after that first video you did, I reached back out to the screening room and said, look, I love my room. I've never heard somebody say that it sounds bad, but I know that it wasn't really designed. Even though it's not an engineered room, what can I do to improve it? Sure. And so working with them, I sent them all the dimensions, I sent them all the equipment that's in the room, and I sent them, they knew what treatments I had from the first time around. Okay. And they produced a professional design that had the exact placement of the speakers, the placement of the seating, the placement of every single treatment in the room, and all of that based on the actual speaker that I'm running. You know, the characteristics of speakers differ from brand to brand, even from model to model. And so my room design takes advantage of the wide dispersion of the Revel speakers and the treatments that I already had. I didn't have to go buy, you know, new treatments. They understood what I had. There's 3 types of treatments in the room. This is 2D diffusion, kind of like a combo panel. Okay. And then you have the absorption panels, and then on the back wall, you'll see a little bit of 3D diffusion. Yeah. And so working with, you know, the screening room and getting a true design that then I could implement with the help of a friend of mine locally, and also knowing that I would eventually have a tuner like Jeff Mary in the room and tuning on site was a big factor in the treatment plan and the overall design of the room. So, and actually they reduced the number of treatments in the room. So your room was maybe too dead or too diffusive It had more diffusion and more, more absorption and a lot more diffusion, 3D diffusion. But what I learned is that through that process, certain types of diffusion they can actually hurt your room if they're not placed within the distances recommended by the manufacturer of the treatment plan. So these are all acoustic treatments, all procured through the screening room, and working with their designer was able to assemble the redo or the makeover of the room acoustically.
Now, do they provide like a 3D drawing so you can kind of see it, like where to place them, or what does that process look like?
So they produce a plan. It's like an architectural plan that has all angles of the room, like from top down or the side walls. And it's not like a 3D walkthrough design, but it has every single angle of the room, and then even the ceiling layout for like the Atmos and where everything is, and then exact precise measurements of where every single speaker goes. And so that's what we implemented. Before I had on wall, and for the surrounds, and then for the rear surrounds, I had bookshelves on stands.
Right. Yeah, I remember those. Yeah.
And so they were actually in people's way when they walked through the room. Having such a narrow room was difficult for the on wall. People would bump them all the time. And so I decided to kind of, based on the acoustic plan and what I knew I wanted to purchase, went with in-walls for everything except the front stage and the Atmos setup. Yeah. So
I know in my room, I'm totally guessing, truthfully, and I've shared that with those that watch my channel. I know where the first reflection point is. Other than that, everything else is aesthetics. And so what's great about hiring a professional that knows acoustics, that has software that they can plug this stuff into, put your dimensions in, they can tell you, okay, here's where you need to put an absorption panel. Here's where we recommend you put a diffusion or maybe a combo panel. But then back here, here's where we want you to position the 3D diffusion. And so knowing precisely where to put that, I think that's huge. And it's kind of interesting, if you guys look at this, they're not identical as far as like, you know, up here we've got, let's see, a combo, and then we've got an absorption, combo, absorption. Again, how would you know to do that unless you have somebody that knows what they're doing, knows about engineering, knows about science and acoustics, to be able to tell you precisely where to put those. So I think there's a huge benefit in that. And, but yeah, I love the way they look too. These are really cool. Definitely got a sweet design to them. And to me, that adds texture. It adds character to your room. It serves a functionality, but it also shares a design aspect as well.
I think, you know, you asked me earlier, or we talked earlier about one of my favorite upgrades being the hush box and the noise floor. I really, truly believe one of the most impactful upgrades, maybe, I mean, of course, everything's my favorite upgrade, but one of the most impactful upgrades from a sound perspective were the treatments. Yeah. I mean, I had a lot of different combinations of speakers, amps, and processors in this room over my 18-year journey. I mean, honestly, the first set was like a receiver stacked into the cubby hole where the rack is today, and JBL tower speakers all, you know, surround. And then upgraded to the Marantz processor with dedicated amplification in the form of the Emotiva, upgraded the speakers to Polk Audio. But I think all of that wouldn't sound like it does today without the treatments and addressing the room itself.
Correct.
And so, again, if I had to do it all over again and I was starting from scratch, the first thing I would do is have a qualified company design your room based on, you know, best practices. And then, you know, in combination, make the decisions on what speakers, you know, that you're using or what you want to do. And then I can't emphasize enough the impact that an on-site tune has versus a remote tune that you can get from the groups or from Facebook, you know, the guys that are doing it remotely. Sure. I'm sure it's better than nothing, but a trained ear who knows exactly what test tracks they're using and what they're listening for, and who's been, you know, trained by the big audio companies. I mean, to me, it's worth of investment. If you're gonna build a room that you're gonna be in a lot and spend that kind of money, to me it makes sense to bring somebody in to tune the room, and that's what I've done here. So
yeah, well, I'm excited. We're gonna get a chance to sit down with Jeff and kind of pick his brain on what did he do in the room, what is his role in getting this room to the level of performance that it is. So I'm excited about that conversation as well. All right, Jay, I want to talk about speakers because you got some incredible speakers here. Walk us through the actual layout. How many speakers, bed layer, Atmos speakers, subwoofers, and then let's go through each speaker and the choices that you made there.
Sounds good, Michael. So this room is a 9.1.4 configuration. Of course, I've got 4 subwoofers for LFE. But yeah, it's a 9-channel bed layer, and that was one of the changes that I did from the last time you were here, is I added the front wides. Which are these? Into the mix. So definitely have been enjoying that, and a lot of the recent movies and content has upped the game in their usage of front wides and even Atmos. So there's 4 Atmos speakers on the ceiling, and then a 9-channel bed layer with 4 subwoofers, 2 in the front, and 2 in the rear. Okay, so we got these big towers up here. Walk me through these jokers. Yeah, what are these? So these are the Revel Salon 2 full range towers, and I really fell in love with these speakers when I visited John Sherman, that owns the screening room in Colorado, and I heard them first in his room actually. And I couldn't believe just the overall detail and the sound and the neutral responsive these speakers. And I listened to a lot of speakers over the past 4 or 5 years as I was knowing that I wanted to eventually replace the Polk Audio towers that I had.
Yeah.
And so first of all, I do run 3 identical towers in the front of the room, and just fell in love with the Salon 2s. These are actually from the last production run of the Salon 2 as they retired the series.
Okay.
And their new flagship is, of course, the large 328 F328BE. So, but I love these Salon 2s.
And so these have a beryllium tweeter in it, correct?
That's correct. So all of the Revel BE series and the previous generation Salons run the beryllium tweeter. And what I love about that tweeter, it never breaks up.
Yeah.
Like on the highest volumes, the highest frequencies, it's just an incredible sound. It probably would break your ears before the tweeter starts breaking up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you're getting, and that was one of the things you shared with me earlier, is that with your Polk, you couldn't drive them as hard.
Right.
They would start to kind of give up. They'd get probably harsh on the top end, maybe even start to break up in the level of clarity there.
Yeah, the Polk LSIM tower, the full-size flagship tower that I was running before, was really a low sensitivity speaker. I think it was 86 dB. And in the previous video, I was running the Emotiva XPA 7, a Gen 2 Class AB amp.
Right.
And it couldn't drive the 3 Polk Audios and the rest of the other bed layer to reference levels without clipping. And so that was, I knew after sitting in all of these reference level rooms at the shows and seeing other people's theaters, that's where I wanted to go.
Sure.
And so that's why I ended up upgrading all of the speakers as well as the amplification that we'll see later.
Yeah, you mentioned that, you added the front wides. That's something I don't see a lot in consumer home theaters. Normally it's a 7-bed layer, and so why did you want to add the extra, 2 channels here for the front wides?
There's a couple of reasons. First of all, the movie content is improving. The Atmos mixes are getting better, obviously, with the more recent releases. Even in the older days of Atmos, it was really placement-based and fixed channels. Now you're seeing a lot more usage of, the entire bed layer and Atmos.
Object-based.
Object-based, truly object. Even though a movie may have been released as an Atmos movie, it was still, like earlier, was still using fixed locations of the speakers, and they've improved that. There's actually a friend of mine, Aaron Antunes, that started a thread on AVS where it analyzes the movies and it'll show you the channel activity for every single speaker up to, I think, 15 plus the sub, 9.1 point. But it'll show you the activity for all the different channels. You can even, search the thread and find out which movies have really active front wides and go back and watch those scenes. And so that's just something that you're seeing more and more of now. The second reason, not just the improvement in movies and stuff, but I actually had these bookshelves in the rear of the room before I did the in-wall setups.
Okay.
And so when I bought the in-wall setup, the Revel, these are the W226Bs, I moved the rear surrounds that were on, the stands to the front because I had them. And so instead of, maybe selling them or something, I said, you know what? Since I'm upgrading my in-walls, I can go ahead and move these and do front wide channels. And so that's exactly what I did.
Yeah, while we're standing here, so these are white.
Yeah.
And I know that we've had some conversation on that. And what are some thoughts that you get when people come in the room or they see your photos online?
Well, the room is really dark. And so it does it makes a little contrast in the room. People either love or hate the white drivers. Awesome. I usually listen with the screens on, obviously, but if I'm feeling especially, happy or I want to see the speakers, I like to take the screens off and look at them. I actually like the white and the contrast it provides. You don't see it when the screens are on, obviously, but but the journey on the speakers is really, going out and listening to, one thing I love about the screening room is they're very scientific in their approach to speakers. And so they host on the regular, double blind shootouts. They did most recently an in-wall blind shootout where you could actually listen to one in-wall speaker and then the other, and the audience would vote for the speaker that they like the best. And the peer-reviewed research that Harman does shows that the majority of audiences actually prefer a neutral, flat measuring speaker rather than a bright speaker or one that's got large dips or peaks. And so after, I guess, 3 or 4 years of, going to CEDIA and hanging out with the folks from the screening room and attending all of their double-blind speaker tests, I knew I was going to, because I fell in love with the Salon 2s to start with, but I knew that I would prefer the sound of the BE series. And, they base the products they sell on the data, the scientific data that says this speaker is going to measure well, or it does measure well. And that's what I love about it. The other thing is they take a completely objective approach to their theater designs. And so that's something that I can appreciate, being someone who's very logically minded. I like the objectivity, and I don't, if you put 2 speakers behind a wall and you can't see them, and you pick the one that you think really truly sounds the best, that's how I made my decision on what speakers to buy. And so really do appreciate the types of events that they put on to expose the community to the scientific approach that they prefer to take when they're designing rooms and deciding what products they sell.
Yeah. In listening to your room, one thing that is really great is you just get this really immersive experience with the audio. And so that's a result of this great bed layer that's just slightly above ear level. But then we've got right above us, you've upgraded this, and this is a massive upgrade to you. Previously, you had in-ceiling speakers that were firing pretty much straight down.
Right.
Were the tweeters aimable on the previous one?
No, that was one of the down. Now, the mid-range was at a 45 degree, so it was facing the MLP. Yeah. But we all know the tweeter is probably the most critical component of the most critical driver to actually have aimed at your listening.
It's got a very narrow amount of dispersion on that.
Yeah. So the story on the in-wall Atmos, I was running the Polk Audio 700 LS series, and they were just down firing, and they actually were close to the correct location if they had been aiming at me, but they weren't in the correct locations. And so I had waited on all of the in-wall speakers to come out from Revel, and then I heard them at CEDIA, then decided to purchase them based on that. The one thing that's really cool, Michael, about the Revel in-wall BE series, it measures almost identically to the tower from the same line of speakers.
Yeah.
So the W226BE, the anechoic data, shows that it is very, very similar measuring to the actual tower, which kind of breaks the myth sometimes that full-size towers are always required and you can't achieve good sound with an in-wall speaker.
Correct.
Totally not the case based on the measurements that you see from, the third parties that are measuring the speakers. And so the Atmos speakers, though, I had been waiting on those because Revel did not make a BE equivalent in-ceiling speaker yet. And so those literally just came out this past year. And knowing that I wanted to complete the complement of a full Revel room, I went ahead and bought those. Now, you'll see, too, that this enclosure, this is not in ceiling, actually. It's on ceiling.
Correct. And
so, again, I revert back to Mike Franks from Michael Franks Design Company. He had already created a blueprint for an enclosure for these speakers. And then, of course, when I bought the speakers, I reached out to Mike and said, hey, man, I need some enclosures. And, he was able to, fabricate them and assemble them and send them to me. And so I want to say that, every time you go through an upgrade cycle, you're like, this is probably going to make a little bit of a difference, right? It'll sound better, this and that. Again, every upgrade I've done has just been very impactful. And this was probably, again, one of the biggest upgrades. Having that speaker and the driver aimed directly at where I'm sitting. I immediately had to back the processor down several dB before I could get the room calibrated because having it fire down into the carpet versus firing directly at me,
Sure.
it was just a huge impact. And that's all part of, you know, the reason Mike designs the enclosures with the baffle at 45 degrees,
Right.
so it can be aimed right at the listening position.
Yeah, and I did a very similar journey. I went from in ceiling to on ceiling, 45. It was a massive upgrade. People come in and they go, I've never heard Atmos like this. I always thought Atmos was terrible.
Right.
Well, people have to realize, you know, the placement, the positioning of them, the type, the drivers, all that that comes into play on the experience that you get that. And then as we talked later with Jeff, calibration on top of that is crucial as well.
Yeah, if you're sitting in the MLP and you just do a line and look, I mean, everything is so symmetrical based on the room design from TSR. So the Atmos lines up exactly with the left and right, and then even if you turn around and look, it's in line with the rear surrounds. And so I think just having the speakers, placing them in the room is one thing, but having it properly designed. And again, I'll just mention tuning is everything whenever you're doing these setups like this. So,
Jay, you know I love subwoofers, man, and you've got some horsepower here. You've got 418s in the room, 2 in the front behind the screen, 2 in the back. Walk us through your choices on these.
Well, thanks, Michael. I was running 2 12s in this room a long time ago, and it was just after COVID and using the room a lot more, I decided to upgrade my bass again, working with Zach and Aaron. And so in the rear of the room, I've got 2 PSA TV18 12s. And then these are positioned at exactly the location that the room design called for.
Okay.
And then in the front of the room, behind the screen, there is 2 custom designed 18s. And I think the enclosures are 12 cubic feet, and it's a ported enclosure. All of these are ported.
Right.
The front subs are UM18.
UM18s, yep.
Yep. And so they're in a custom enclosure that's port tuned at 11.5 hertz, each of those. And so those are actually positioned facing the external, like out, and these are faced in, and they're located at 37.5 inches based on the room design to minimize nulls and stuff. So yeah, and the bass has got a lot of headroom. Some people may think, why do you have 418s in a room so small? I mean, this room again it's like 225 square feet, but really it's all about having just the ability to have the headroom. And a friend of mine tells me all the time, well, you can never have enough bass. You can always turn it down if you need to.
That's correct.
Like when my wife comes up here, so. or at night when I'm watching movies and she's in bed. So, but yeah, I've always been a bass head though. Yeah. Even car audio when I was a teenager, hooking that up. So, enjoy this.
People that have never experienced big 18s, and I get this on my channel, they'll say, Michael, my 12-inch rattles the dishes in my kitchen. Well, that's nice. And nothing wrong with that. But I'm telling you, this is a totally different experience when you step up to big, massive drivers that have the ability to pressurize your room, that have the ability to dig down deep. And these do, those do. You're getting down to about what in this room?
It's completely flat to 10 hertz.
So 10 hertz. I mean, that's ridiculous. So that, of course, isn't stuff we can hear, but our bodies can absolutely feel that. So when we were watching like Ready Player One and Kong jumps off and he lands on the freeway, that's guttural, man. You're feeling that in your body. But your system is dialed in. Jeff has done a great job at keeping that balanced. And he was telling us, of course, I can adjust that to taste. I can bump it up. You said you probably might want to go about
3 dB hotter, on the subs.
So he may adjust that.
Then a reference level,
Yeah, so being able to have a couple different presets with Dirac and be able to switch between those to bump up that bass when you want it. But your room is very balanced. The bass is absolutely not overwhelming. And like you said, I would rather have these things coasting along. Right. That means lower distortion. If you've got a 12-inch or a 15-inch driver and it's 1, and you're trying to feel the bass, so guess what you're doing? You're cranking up the volume. And so you're maxing out that subwoofer's capability. So it's running into probably distortion, could run into clipping. And so that's just not good. Your system is super clean. One thing I was listening for, whether we were listening to music or even movies with these big dynamic peaks and subtle nuances. I'm hearing like every little frequency, so it's smooth. That I didn't audibly notice. Okay, I should have heard bass there, and I didn't. It's very smooth across that, and that's what you want to try to achieve when you're building a room.
I'm a music lover too, and one thing I see all the time online is this a music room or a movie room?
Yeah.
And I think I have friends that subscribe to the fact that movies are music.
That is correct.
80% of the movie has a score with it that either John Williams or Hans Zimmer wrote to accompany the picture, and so for someone to say that it should sound slightly different or this is set up for music, I can understand 2-channel obviously, right? Yeah. But in a room where you enjoy both 2-channel music and movies, it's really, there's no difference because you got full volume music in a movie score that is actually just the same, and usually multi-channel format versus a 2-channel music listening. So I never have kind of understood that question because I feel like if you build the right room, you treat it properly, you have the design done, and then of course you have it tuned, your music should be great and your movie should be great.
And I think a well-designed speaker, because some people say that, well, these speakers are better for movies. Okay, then that's not a really great designed speaker, in my opinion. I think a well-designed speaker should be able to handle music and movies. A well-designed subwoofer should be able to handle music and movies. And like I said, it's just a great, great system. So we're standing here in front of your rack. So I know these guys love talking about audio and the video and the components and kind of the brains behind this system. So what do you got running in here?
A lot of changes since the last time you were here. I think the only piece of equipment in the rack that's the same is the processor and maybe the front sub amp, the Behringer.
Okay.
One thing I talked about earlier was like reaching the limit of the Emotiva amp with the speakers that I had, and so I worked with. I reached out to Buckeye. Dylan at Buckeye has been amazing to work with. The way he describes his business and how it started was that he is an enthusiast that wanted a better product at a more affordable price. Yeah. And so he has done so much for the community when it comes to amplifiers. And knowing that I had the 3 Salon 2s in the front, I reached out to him for the NCX 500, which was his newest Hypex based amp. That's a 3-channel amp. I think it's rated at 4 ohms at 700 watts per channel.
Plenty of power.
And so I installed that for the front stage, and it has been amazing. I've never experienced, even the system's been tuned twice now by Jeff, and it never had any clipping or anything, and just hours and hours of listening. Yeah. And one thing that was an immediate benefit that I noticed, the Emotiva amp was a Class AB amp, and it was really hot and warm running amp.
Oh yeah.
And so now that I've swapped out all of the Class AB amps for the new Class D designs, my rack is much cooler than it was before. Yeah. So getting back to kind of like the heat reduction in the room, these fans on the top never turn on anymore. And when I had the previous setup, those fans would come on, and then again you start hearing things that you shouldn't be hearing in a theater, and so that's been a huge benefit. So power output for the Buckeye amplifiers, as well as noise reduction in cooling, and just my rack. Who doesn't like a lighter, cooler running rack? So that's been a big upgrade for me. So he did the 3-channel amp on the front.
Okay.
The rest of the bed layer is running off of a 6-channel Hypex amp. It was the previous generation that he had. I think that's the NC502.
All right.
And then most recently I added the NC252 as the Atmos, as I replaced I had an older Emotiva 7-channel amp running the Atmos. And so I was able to get the 4-channel Hypex module from Dylan.
Yeah.
And so another thing that's cool about Dylan, even when Jeff was here tuning the room the first time, there were some jumper settings that we weren't sure about, and I literally emailed Dylan while we were sitting here tuning, and he responded immediately. Yeah. So, he's US-based, customer service, he's very responsive, and for those that really care, his products are assembled in the USA, which is always nice.
Yeah, I've had lots of conversations with Dylan. He's a super cool dude. He started off as an enthusiast, and he still is. And I think that's what's kind of unique about his story is he's like, man, there's some expensive amps out there. I think I could make something that would be just as quality, but bring that price down that makes it a lot more attainable for folks. And, you know, it's not crazy fancy machine front and all these fancy, you know, chassis, but that helps keep the cost down. And so these are rock solid, you know, high output, and very rarely you're going to be able to buy an amplifier that's 700 watts, you know. That's huge.
700 watts of clean power with a very high signal to noise ratio.
Yeah.
And so one thing that I love about these amps is just the simplicity in the design, the ability to drive the, you know, speakers, the very demanding speakers that we have, but also just the fact that they run so much cooler in the rack. You know, Dylan believes, and he shared this with me, that you don't have to have the most expensive amplifiers to get really high quality sound. A lot of people may, you know, look at a high-end room and you know, you'll see high-end amplifiers that are super expensive. But I didn't want to compromise on the sound quality or the ability of the room, and that's why I chose Buckeye, because they are affordable and they're made here in the USA. So that's a big thing for me.
Yeah. So working our way up, I see we've got Croson here. We didn't mention that earlier.
Yes.
Your Crosons are installed. These are tactile transducers, actuators.
Yep.
They weren't added into the system earlier because y'all didn't have enough time to timeline them, right?
Right. So we didn't get those tuned last night. We were up until midnight doing all that kind of stuff. But
how are you liking that, though? How long have you had those?
So I did have the Crosons installed, or I installed the Crosons. It was actually after you were here the first time. If you remember, I had the Hover Easy platform with the subwoofer, the dual 12s built into the platform. And I kind of honestly got tired of the maintenance on that, you know, keeping the air pressures in the inner tubes under the platform at a certain level. And I just wanted just a solution that I could just, you know, turn my system on and start rocking. And so the Crosons actually fit under the seats, and there's 4 Crosons under the 3 seats. There's 2 in the main listening position and 1 on each perimeter seat. And also installed the Croson amp to replace. I was driving the Hover Easy platform with another Behringer amp, and so just having an all-inclusive solution, all Croson. I actually got to meet Randy at M-Wave. He was there at M-Wave, and so was able to meet him and talk to him about the amps. And I like to have under the seating where it's really just, it doesn't like hit you in the face. I think that was something that having the Hover Easy platform, it could be unpredictable. You know, when I was watching movies, all of a sudden you would get a big shake when you weren't expecting it, or it would bounce a little bit. And so I just feel like the Croson solution's a lot more natural, and the integration, you know, works really well with the system. So.
So going up from there, what do we got?
So the Behringer amp there drives the 2 front subs, 18s. And so that was there the first time around. But then we talked earlier about the JVC projector and taking best advantage of that projector using external tone mapping. And so I worked with Chris Deering, and he sold me the Lumagen and the projector calibration. And so using the 1U Lumagen, which I really like the fact, because you'll notice my rack is kind of a shorter rack. I think it's like 40, a 42U rack
You're
versus
limited on your space, the amount.
It's 45 inches or something like that, but limited on space. So I do like the fact that the Lumagen is a 1U component. And you know what I love about it? It just works. I turn the system on. The Lumagen is reliable. I don't have any issues with it, you know, locking up or resetting or anything. So it's been a pretty rock solid piece of componentry from a video perspective. Still running the JBL SDP55, and so I'm loving the way it sounds. And Dirac and Jeff has worked his magic on it. And one of my bigger upgrades this past year, and I wasn't a believer for a long time. I felt like, you know, I can rip my own movies, or I can stream them and, you know, just watch them. And what I started seeing at all the shows, everybody runs Kaleidescapes for their demos rooms and everything, and then all of my buddies started getting them, and I started feeling a little bit of pressure.
Yeah.
But now that I have it, I'm like, how did I live without that? You know, because I just, from my phone, I can just say, okay, buy that movie, and when I get home that day, the full 4K feature length, even in some movie cases, not compressed, it's bigger files than what you would get off of if you took your disc and ripped it. And it's just the convenience, and the user interface is just so easy to use. And I'm a huge believer now, and Kaleidescape hits me all the time with those movie packs on the holidays where you get 6 movies for like $24.99. It's a no-brainer.
Well, the Mission Impossible just came out.
Mission Impossible until May 20th. You can get it for $24.99 for all 6 movies, right? I think it's 6 or 7. Yeah. And so actually I clicked on that last night. They suckered me
and now
into
that you know about favorites and you can kind of bookmark them, now you're going to be getting more notifications.
I still use the NVIDIA Shield for streaming.
Okay.
That's the component. I like the fact that it's lossless audio. And there's a lot of rumors on the street right now that they're working on a new version, but I don't know if any of that's
asking for it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's I don't know if those rumors have been substantiated, but it uses the same processor as the Nintendo Wii or Game Boy or something, and they do know that there's a new one of those releasing, so everybody's hopeful that we get a Shield upgrade.
Sure.
And then rarely do I pull out a disc, but if I do, I've got the Panny DP-UB820 for, physical media, and so that's pretty much the rack. The rack actually pulls out and rotates
so 90
degrees for access, and kind of had to do that. But in the pursuit of chasing a low noise floor, I may move this rack to the office at some point in the future, so we'll see. Kind of close that hole in and finish out the treatments for that corner. So,
all right, Jay, one important aspect of any home theater is theater seating, and you've actually got a pretty unique design here. You didn't go with 2 identical rows of seating, so walk us through your seating choice here and what we're looking at in the back row as well as the front.
Yeah, so Michael, all my friends were making fun of me for having the couch up front for all those years, and so I decided to kind of up the game a little bit, get something very comfortable. But the fact that audio is very important to me, I wanted something that had a low back. A lot of the theater seating you see, even my prior seating extend up, even with my head, and it would kind of block some of the audio and the directionality of the speakers. So I waited a long time until I could actually see and feel and sit in something, and had the opportunity to do that last year at the Midwest AV show. And all the major seating vendors were there, including Valencia. And these are the Barcelona. And so these are the XL version. They're a little bit longer and deeper, but the thing I love about them is the quality of the leather. They're quiet, they're comfortable, and they have the low backs on them that I can, not interfere with the audio on. So it was important for me. I wasn't about to spend that kind of money on a seat without actually experiencing it. And so being able to have that opportunity at the show last year was big for me. And so I don't even know if these were at Cedia. They did come to, the Barcelonas were at M-Wave, and so that was important for me. So finally just confirmed what I knew I probably thought all along, which is I would love the seats and be able to use those. So that's what I ended up doing, and have worked out pretty well. And then I did have a second row before, but since I swapped out to the Barcelonas in the front, I thought it was important. At first I was just going to run 3 seats in my theater, but then those few times where you had a number of people over and they wanted to be able to experience the theater with you, I didn't have anywhere for them to sit. So I decided to go ahead and get the second row. And this is kind of an overflow seating for the second row. But I wanted to kind of match and still have the black leather and stuff like that. And then these armrests can go up or down. But they're also kind of a low back design as well. Right. And so these seats turned out to be very comfortable, more comfortable than I expected. I had a long wait on these after I ordered them, but it worked out really well. So they they do really well for the second row.
And these are bolted into your platform here.
Actually, I want to have the ability to easily remove them, so I actually bought the optional base with them, and you can move these out of the room separately without having to unbolt them from the platform, or if you're working in the room and you need to move them. I've thought about bolting them to the platform, but as of right now, I'm just keeping them with the built-in bracket on the bottom that you can remove if you ever decide to. So where'd you get these from? I think these were for maybe 4theaters.com or seating. I'll have to look that up. But
like 4Seating.
Yeah, 4Seating. 4Seating, that's what it was. And so, again, they were custom ordered because they don't stock, you know, this seat with the leather. And so I think they were assembled in South America. And so shipped directly to me, and I had to wait a little bit longer to get them than I would have liked to, but I'm glad I waited because they are super comfortable. And I've had lots of different seating in the room over the years. Started out with the Berkline recliners, home theater recliners, but I'm really happy with my decisions. And again, just getting out in the community, experiencing other people's seats, or going to shows and being able to sit down. These, I mean, think this is where you sit during the entire movie, so it's got to be comfortable. Right. And I'm happy with this decision. So,
all right, Jeff, your name has been brought up throughout this whole home theater tour. I'm excited to get your perspective. He's been a huge instrument in the building and development and the calibration side of this room. So I'd love to pick your brain on what was your role in this project.
Yeah, thanks. So I think, Jay, I'm trying to remember how you found out about kind of my service. Was it through Zach?
Zach and Aaron.
Yeah, Zach and Aaron and those guys. So I'd kind of started out just helping people make their systems better. I had some series, this short video series on YouTube that I help on Room EQ Wizard and some of the free things, just to try to give back a little bit, and turned into a little bit of a side business on my own. And I got connected with Jay, who was really kind of looking to take his theater up a notch. And as far as my role, I kind of pride myself on support, like before, during, and then after the process. And as Jay was starting to talk about all these different changes, we talked about the speaker upgrades and the acoustic treatments. He'd bounce ideas off of me, ask me, help me understand what he was seeing, and what kind of through his implementation process. And once he got everything set up, that's kind of when the actual calibration itself begins. And the process that I follow is very strongly based on the HT3 certification from Home Acoustics Alliance. So you go to homeacousticsalliance.org. They have a home calibrator course that you can take. There's levels HT 1, 2, and 3. And the thing that I liked about that course is, one, the folks that run it, Jerry LeMay, he's a great guy. He's been doing this for a long time. He really knows his stuff. And two, it's a very hands-on, practical course. So mine happened to be after CEDIA when it was in Dallas, and you have processors, speakers, seating areas, subs, and you're actually moving things around and seeing how it's very, very hands-on. So, there's 5 or 6 people in there, I think, and we were, pushing subs around the room and marking modal frequencies on the floor with tape, and, understanding what happens with different speaker designs and how orienting them in certain ways will change the sound. So it really helped connect a lot of the theory to the implementation practice, which is really important. And once I get into Jay's room, that process that I follow involves, like Jay said a couple of times, checking every single thing out in the room. Start with speaker positioning. We were talking earlier, like one of the things that, again, giving back to the community, what can I do to make my room better? Right. Get your speakers in the right spots, or get them as close as you can to the right spots. It's a little thing. It doesn't cost you anything, but take the time to measure stuff out, get them in the right places. Verifying all that according to the design that was done by the folks with the screening room. Jay had done a great job with it, so I didn't have to make too many adjustments. Checking every single speaker and comparing them against third-party measurements. Luckily, all of these have third-party measurements available to make sure they're all performing correctly, and that got down to testing each individual driver to make sure that that speaker and that speaker are actually wired the same, and you didn't get a Friday speaker where one of them's got something switched. I've seen that before. Sure. Because you don't want to calibrate a system that's got something inherently wrong. Right. And then everything is really based off of listening. It's not, I don't just show up and run Dirac and walk out the door. no room correction on the planet is perfect.
Correct.
They are a lot of them are very, very good, but you need to take the time to understand what is it doing to the system and how is that impacting the sound, not just at the main listening position, but at the front of the room and the back of the room and the seats that are off axis, to make sure that, you know, you're really dialing things in to sound as good as they can across the board.
Yeah.
Across the board.
So I know we like to talk about the positive, but I'm sure there were some challenges maybe in this room. Were there any challenges that you ran into and that you had to figure out a solution for?
Yeah, one of the bigger challenges, and Jay mentioned this earlier, is we had some gain structure challenges between the processor, the amplifiers. We wanted to make sure that we weren't overdriving anything. We wanted to make sure there wasn't any noise in the system. He has a small mini DSP device in between his processor and the subs that we needed to tinker with.
You actually went in and changed them.
Changing jumpers and making sure that the input voltage setting was correct for the output capabilities of the processor, which is different. Every brand is different, so you want to make sure that you match those things up, so you're not, you know, some devices don't go into clipping before they should, right? We don't want to clip anything when we can avoid it. So, it's one of the challenges. You know, a room like this, you know, he mentioned like it's really overflow seating, so it can be a challenge sometimes to get like even bass response with multiple rows of seating. So we did what we main calibration for Jay's theater was, you know, really MLP in the front row. Back row ended up sounding really, really good, which was great. But those are probably the bigger ones. Jay, I don't know if you remember anything.
I remember you did a lot of tweaking on the center channel because of the screen the first time around.
Yeah, that can be a challenge. So, you know, acoustically transparent screens are great. You guys were talking about that earlier today. But one of the challenges, and it's just a coincidence, Jay's room is just like my room, where your left and right speakers are outside the screen, but then you've got a center channel behind the screen. And what that does is it causes some high frequency attenuation. The challenge isn't just EQing that up. The challenge is you want that speaker to match the other two across the sound signature across the board, because these are excellent speakers. You don't want to mess with them. You want to be really, really gentle with what you do to them. So we spent a lot of time not just listening, you know, make an adjustment, listen, but also measuring. Like, am I adding too much in a certain space? So I want to be really, really careful with that, because we don't want, a simple example, we don't want to overdrive that speaker in some area and end up with some kind of a harsh sound. And that's so critical with voices and the tonality you get from male and female vocals. So that was a lot of time.
I like your approach that you've got the objective side of it, so you're taking a look at the data. Some people just go to that extreme and they want to just see what it looks like on a graph, and that's one thing. But then you've got the subjective side where they're just listening to their ears. You take that balanced approach. You want to measure the data, listen with your ears, use both of those to figure out, okay, what adjustments do I need to make this sound as best as I can, and part of that's just experience.
Yeah, there's a lot of experience with it. It is one of the things that's taught in that HT, the Home Acoustics course, which I think is great. I'm going to name drop. I don't usually name drop, but I was really, really fortunate. The one that I attended was taught right after CEDIA, so it was Jerry from Home Acoustics Alliance, and it was Adam Pells, who is, I think that's a very popular name. He's probably one of the best calibrators in the world. And he walked us through like what you're listening for and why you're listening for certain things. Like you're getting, you know, Rational Acoustics has a great little article about the 7 dwarves of bad sound and like what the difference between like honky and boxy and all these things sound like. And you start to kind of understand what that looks like. And going back to kind of marrying up the objective and the subjective, I can have like these LCR speakers, I can make them look exactly the same on a frequency chart, and that center channel will sound different.
Interesting.
So you have to understand, like, okay, great, they sound different. Where do I need to make that change? Where do I need to adjust that? And you can kind of go in and say, oh, well, it's really far forward, so I need to bring this area down a little bit, or maybe there's not quite enough of that, you know, the consonants and the hard sounds. Okay, so that means I need to do something a little bit different over here.
Okay.
So
yeah. I know you mentioned the boxy. Y'all were talking center channel, and you said something. What did you describe
yesterday?
it as?
He was tweaking the center channel again. You know, so critical. And he sat there, and I watched him listen. And then he said, Jay, I want you to sit here and tell me what you hear. And it wasn't something that you would expect scene-wise for a calibrator to be watching to see how the system sounds. It was literally just a vocal dialogue between two actors in the movie No Time to Die. Yeah, that's right. And so it was like a 60-second clip. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what are you listening for, Jeff? And then he said, well, you sit here and tell me what you hear. And I immediately picked up a little bit on what I called what did I use? It wasn't the term boxy. It was muffled, or I don't know. It was something with the mid-range. And I picked up on it, and he said, oh, I said boxy. He said chesty.
Chesty, that's what I was saying.
And so I was like, really, man, I'm actually learning what I can listen for and stuff. So that was, but I wondered, because he was sitting there with his eyes closed, listening to two people talk, and I'm like, okay, something's going on here. So yeah. The one thing too I love, I mention the screening room a lot because they're very scientific and data-driven. Data-driven measurements and everything. And so I had a friend growing up, he used to tell me, in God we trust, everybody else, bring your data. So I'm glad that there's manufacturers out there that actually, like Per Listen or Revel, that will actually show you the real measurements of their speakers. And so that makes a big part of the reason I chose the platforms and the brands that I went with. So
yeah. So Jeff, when you're calibrating a system, what are some of the, maybe are there some certain test tracks that you really like to utilize, and maybe what are you looking for in that?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's easy to take a movie and throw a movie on there and have, in this room, 13 speakers and 4 subs kind of blaring, but you're going to miss all the nuance and detail. Right. And so that's why my calibration process, I always use really, really simple musical tracks. Okay. So I got at the title, Apple Music, I can play it, so I can play it anywhere. Right. And one of the tracks is called High Lily, High Low, and it's got this really simple 3-piece. It's a singer, it's a guitar, and it's an upright bass. And I use that, one, to check imaging. Okay. And she should be dead center. Right. The guitar should be a little bit off to the right. The bass should be off to the left. And then when the bass starts to play, where is the bass coming from? How does it sound? Does it sound natural? Is it too small? Is it too big? Is the sound coming from where it should on the soundstage, or am I hearing it kind of come from the room, which indicates that there's probably some modal tones that need to be adjusted. There's a couple of tracks that I'll use for things like focus. There's one from David Axelrod that was recorded back in the late 60s called Holy Thursday. And it's got, those old 60s recordings, great dynamic range, really well recorded. And again, it's imaging. That one's a little bit of a trick track because when the bass guitar starts to play at the very beginning, it shouldn't be centered. Oh, it should be just a little bit off center to the right. And there's some things that I listen to for the horns and the strings when they come in, and they should be appearing in certain places. Yeah. And then I've got tracks that I use for testing envelopment. Can I get that stereo surround sound from just 2 channels of sound? So it's there's probably 7 or 8 different tracks that I use for that kind of stuff. A really popular one that I used to love the song, and my apologies to Tracy Chapman. But Fast Car is one of those, if you put it on an RTA while you're playing it, it's got it hits every frequency from 20 hertz all the way to 20K. And her voice is really, really challenging. So when you do things like trying to get the center channel correct, switching back and forth between native and Dolby Up mixer, does her voice change? And then figuring out how the voice change and how you need to adjust that center channel to really make sure that the voice, the only thing that should happen when you go from 2-channel to Dolby Up mixer is it should become more centered for this seat and for the seats that are off axis, right? It should, instead of being skewed to one side, it should kind of snap in, but it shouldn't change tone. Okay. It shouldn't become more forward, more back. It shouldn't become boxy or hollow or anything like that. So that's a pretty, I could go on, but that's a pretty good overview.
That was one thing, after the room was treated, there were certain 2-channel music tracks that I literally thought were playing through the front wides and the surrounds. And even yesterday when Jeff was verifying some of the work he had done, I was actually sitting in the back row, And I was like, Jeff, is that a stereo track? Because I looked at the processor to see what mode it was in. And he said, he turned around and he smiled and said, yeah, that's a stereo track, but it doesn't sound like a stereo track. So that was pretty neat.
Yeah, and the music has, the calibration has a lot to do with that, making sure that you've got, the right frequencies and timing and phase alignment and all that. But that also is room acoustics. That goes back to
that's room right to begin with.
Getting the room right and the treatment rights to begin with, and that's how I know that, like Sean and those folks over that did the acoustic treatment plan. That's how I know it's a really good treatment plan, right? Because you're able to get some of the envelopment and the spaciousness that you want, but you're still able to maintain really good focus and precise placement of instruments and things like that on the soundstage. So it's everything coming together. It's a good installation plan for where the speakers need to be located, the seating, the acoustic treatments, their location, and then that final audio calibration is really what brings everything together. Like we were talking earlier, like the bass is really, you hear every single little note that you want in the bass. You can hear whether a bass guitar has some kind of distortion pedal or something like on it, all that. It's the cherry on the top that really brings it all together.
So the average consumer, they're going to have Odyssey, they're going to have Dirac, they're going to have YPow or whatever. And, they're going to place the microphone here. They're going to run calibration, run it here, 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 here. We're good to go, That might take them 30 minutes, possibly 45 minutes. What kind of time frame are we looking at when you came into Jay's theater room? Like, how much time are you spending dialing his system in, calibrating, measuring, listening? What is that process, like the length of time there for you?
Before I answer that, I want to address Odyssey and Dirac and even Trinov's Optimizer and YPow. Running that without doing anything else is better than nothing.
Correct. Yeah.
It's better than nothing because that at least is going to get the speakers time aligned reasonably well. I always double check it, but they generally do a reasonably good job there. They generally do a reasonably good job getting the speaker SPL levels correct, and they will correct some stuff in the room. So yes, there's a lot of different tools out there to dive into, but doing something is better than doing nothing. Yeah. So, and a lot of those things are really, really easy. Denon and Odyssey, I think, have an on-screen display where you pop up a mic, put it here, click the button, put it here. So just definitely do that. As far as an in-person calibration, kind of for the level I've done at Jay's room, it's a day and a half to a 2-day process. The first time that I come out, because if I've never been in a room, I want to go through and I want to check every single speaker.
Right.
I want to check.
You said you're measuring the tweeter, and then you're measuring the mid-range, and
that
driver or that tower there has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that you've got to measure, and you're doing that for every speaker.
Do that for every single speaker. So I'll take like near field. Near field in a room is about a meter away, but on and off axis measurements, because I want to make sure. So Jay's got 4 of these Revel W226BEs. Are they all measuring the same, or is one show a problem? I mentioned when we were chatting on a break, I calibrated a client's room down in San Antonio, and he had these big 3-way speakers up front, and we found when I listened, I was like, these things are kind of skewed to the right. It didn't sound quite right. It's like maybe it's just a timing or a level thing, and then I started taking measurements, and the mid range was just gone.
Right.
He had a defective mid range, and we needed to go and get that repaired, and that's good. I mean, you want to calibrate a system that's working. So that takes a lot of time, diagramming the room, double checking speaker locations, things of that nature. So it's typically, first time out, it's typically a day and a half to 2 days for up to about 15 channels with four subs.
Okay.
The second time around, we kind of goofed off. We went and ate lunch. We ran over to sporting goods store because I forgot to pack shorts. Didn't have anything but jeans with me today or on the trip. But it was still a solid, probably 6.
I was going to say about 6 hours.
6 hours solid because I needed to double check. I needed to measure the tops since those were new speakers and things of that nature. So it's a pretty intensive process.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people don't realize. To do it right and to do it very well, the service that you provide is different than what I can do on my own.
It is.
I don't have the tools that you have. I don't have the experience. I don't have the education. I don't have a lot of those things. So I'm going to do the best I can, and I think my room sounds great. Jay thought his room sounded great before, and it did. But having a professional calibrator come in to really dial it in and to make sure that you're getting the maximum capability of your room system, I think that's just what you provide. So if somebody has, like, what different platforms do you work with? Trinov? Are we talking Odyssey? Are we, like, what do you prefer to use?
I would say 95+% of my work is on Trinov and Storm.
Okay.
But I've been on a journey like Jay. I started out as an enthusiast.
Yeah.
I used to have a JBL SDP 55, just like he has. So I've got, good experience. I kind of know that every processor has their own little quirks and things like that. So, I'll step into a few here and there. Denon's, anything based on that Archem platform like the JBL. But yeah, most of it's Trinov and Storm these days. But I try to be a little selective.
So has he been kind of nudging you to be getting a Trinov here?
There might be an upgrade in the future. We'll have to see. The fun thing too is that Jeff's just a good down-to-earth guy, and it's fun to hang out with people of similar, like-minded mentality and enthusiast mentality. So it's been good. But
in the time that
I'm thankful he still tunes the JBLs though for now.
And even in just the day that we've had a chance to hang out, I can tell this is more than a job. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. This is what drives us. This is what we get really excited about. And when you can figure out, what you're excited about and figure out, man, what can I offer in that space, and how can I make money doing it, and providing value to people, treating them right, telling them what they need, not what is going to, make you the most money. That's when you find somebody that you can trust. So when he says, hey, Jay, I think you need to do this, or if we did this, he's not just giving you a sales pitch. He's not just trying to make a commission. He's literally saying, okay, if this was my room, here's what I would do, and here's why I would do that.
I think Jeff enjoys working with people that are enthusiasts as well. I mean, when he walked out of this room the first time, I think I talked about it earlier in the video, I had a report of things that I needed to get done if I really wanted to go to the next level. Mm-hmm. So knowing that he was going to be back on site to tune the Atmos speakers at some point, I invested in the new HVAC system and the hush box and everything. And, I don't know how often it happens where he gets to revisit a client's, room after they actually implement the changes he recommends. But, it's a rewarding feeling to hear what he has to say about the system. And for me, like, even, you may not see him much because he's behind the scenes today, but when we went through the demos, I just enjoyed seeing the look on John's face and then you talking to him afterwards, because it's truly a treat for an enthusiast to have a first-timer in their room and to hear what a room can really sound like. So that gives me joy personally. Yeah. And so...
Well, when you talk about folks like, you talked about Dylan's an enthusiast, right? Yep. He wanted a better... I started out as an enthusiast. Yep. Everybody starts out kind of on a real similar journey, I think. And
Mike Franks is a big enthusiast.
Everybody, we're all enthusiasts first, and we want to try to give back a little bit. And, I just a little bit about my background is I just want to make my own theater sound really good. Mm-hmm. Like, I'll go get some stuff. And I was like, man, I really enjoy this. Right. Oh, wait a minute, I can do this, and then I don't have to pay for my own home theater equipment anymore. I can use this to fund my home theater habit.
Right.
So
that's right.
Yeah, it's great. It's fun meeting like-minded people and people that are curious and ask questions and want to understand. And I would take, I'd take one of those clients over, 10 where I show up, I don't ever see anyone, calibrate a room and walk out. Yeah, and it's don't get me wrong, like, I appreciate it, but I really enjoy it. It pays the bills, but I really enjoy working with the enthusiasts. I really do.
Well, and that's what I've always encouraged on my channel, is that to me this is what means the most to me. I love the gear. I love the excitement. I love, John, my cameraman, he's over there grinning ear to ear, like going, I've never experienced anything like this in my life, and that's awesome. But the reality is the friendships and the stories and the eating lunch and the breakfast and hanging out doing demos, to me, that's what means the most. And I love sharing your stories, because you have a story, I've got a story, you've got a story, and being able to share that that passion, that obsession for great audio, great video, music and movies, and then building a system that we can kind of celebrate that, dude, there ain't nothing like that.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
All right, Jay, we're wrapping up the video, but I got a couple questions for you. The first thing, why did you want to build a dedicated space in your home? You've lived in this home for 18 years. Why did you want to build a space that you could come and watch movies and listen to music? Like, where's the heartbeat that comes from that?
So, always have been into consumer electronics, and have always, even when I first was married, the group of groomsmen went together and bought me a center channel as my wedding gift.
What a gift! That's awesome.
And so, always been into consumer electronics, and for me, it really is a sanctuary. Especially during COVID, that's when a lot of the substantial improvements in my room happened, because I was spending more time working at home, every single day, and I was on back-to-back phone calls, and I really just needed somewhere that I could kind of decompress in between calls or during my lunch break. And so started doing some research on how can I improve the room and stuff. And so I would think that for me, this room is a huge decompression chamber. I love the sound. I love dealing with the electronics and watching movies and music, but I really use the room to binge watch shows and decompress with music, and that just helps bring my stress levels down. Do have a stressful job. The work that I do, consulting, can be pretty stressful and demanding, and especially during the time of COVID, that was tough. So that, and just being a hobbyist the whole time, being into consumer electronics and high fidelity audio and video and stuff has always been a passion of mine. And so those are the big reasons. As we had kids and our family evolved, the having them and hosting my kids' friends and stuff here instead of having them going elsewhere was also a benefit, because everybody would want to come over and hang out and watch movies at the Waller house. And so even hosted a youth event at the house over the weekend, and we had, I think we had like 16 high school girls in the home for the weekend for a D Now event with our church, and they were able to all pack in the theater and watch Disney movies, after our devotion and stuff. So just, having that kind of option to entertain, and for me personally, just to decompress is important for me. So, and I still use it as a decompression method,
Sure.
So
one thing that's kind of interesting, you spend a lot of time making sure there aren't any distractions in your room. We don't want any speaker that's taking kind of the main stage and pulling away from the others. Like, sometimes people turn their subwoofers up too loud, and so you're always noticing them. Like, oh man, that was awesome. Or maybe the Atmos or your height speakers are turned up too loud, and you're watching the movie, but then you're like, oh, that was cool. Well, you totally took yourself out. So what you're talking about is this is a place to come and kind of escape the world for just a little bit, to be immersed in a movie, to be immersed in a concert, and the lights go out, the speakers disappear, and it's just you kind of being transported to somewhere else. And I think that's part of the joy of building a space like this, whether it's a bonus room like this. I've encouraged you guys, man, if you've got a bedroom, I've seen cool home theaters in 11 by 12 foot bedroom. My room is shorter than this. It's 13 by 19, so I don't have the depth you'd have, but I've made it work. Maybe you just got a living room. Do it. Do something in your space.
I just visited, so through Home Theater Enthusiast Facebook group, I've made some friends online, and actually the two people locally that have visited my room, they saw me posting or saw my room on the group. And so just most recently, I had a guy reach out, another local from Tallahassee. There's like 3 of us, by the way, in all of Tallahassee. And I was able to host Levi Wainwright came over to the house, and he'd never been in a room like this before. And so that was cool to experience, because he messaged me from the Facebook page and was able to come over and check it out, which I love, having people over and hosting. And then just last 2 weekends ago, I believe, he actually converted a small, space, like a 12 by 13, or I don't know what the dimensions were, but it would have normally been a bedroom or whatever. Right. He converted that space to a dedicated room, and so I was able to kind of go over and hang out with him and talk about his setup. He's got the 100, I think it's the 100-inch Hisense.
Oh yeah, the TV.
The TV, nice. And it was amazing. And so so just even that level of friendships have been developed just based on participating in the group, and now there's 3 of us in Tallahassee that I know of. So, but that was cool. That was able to kind of go check out a very small dedicated space that he did. So
yeah. Well, Jay, you and I both know our home theaters are never done.
Never done.
You've been in this process, this personal journey of building out this gorgeous room, amazing performance room, but there's always things down the road that either we're looking to upgrade. Of course, technology is going to change, but maybe looking down the road, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road, are there any changes to your room, any upgrades that you kind of foresee coming down the road?
Possibly. I can't give away too much. My wife is watching this video. Not that she's ever held me back. She's always been very supportive of my hobby. But 2 things that I was looking at, possibly maybe a Trinov in the future.
We mentioned that.
To have a room that performs as well as it can, and to have all the customization and tweaking that can happen from somebody like Jeff. I would definitely consider, looking into that, and am looking into that. The other
now, would
thing,
that be the altitude 16?
16 would be all I need for this room.
Yep.
And then the second thing I was thinking about was turning the door frame around in the back of the room. So right now there's 2 doors that open into the space.
These back here, okay, right?
Yep. The 2 doors back there that you see between the speakers. Having that door swing into the office and maybe downsizing it to a single door, so that I get more space for and just more floor space, because when you walk in, you got to close the door on the right before you can pass behind the seating and the subwoofer.
So it's kind of a challenge getting in and out.
And then possibly, but not required at all, at some point I may look at upsizing the screen. Right now it's 110-inch 16 by 9, and the scope size is right at 100 inches. And so thinking about bringing the goalpost design, minimalist screen design, forward and putting a bigger screen in that would be a scope screen, probably a 130-inch scope screen that would be in front of the fronts, the left and right at that point, not just the center. In order to do that, though, I have to move the projector, because right now it's only 11 feet from screen to lens.
Sure.
And so to be able to hit a 130-inch screen,
back that up.
I need to back the projector up, and that's going to get tricky because the doors do open into the room right now, and with the hush box, it's about 15 inches from ceiling to the edge of the box, maybe a little less. And then the doors are right at 14 and a half. So we'd have
open
to
up the other way.
We'd have to open the other way, So
see, I'm trying to help you out.
So those are just, but overall, I am completely satisfied with the room after having the design done and the acoustic plan addressed, and then upgrading all the speakers and amps. It just puts a huge smile on my face every time I sit down to watch TV or listen to music. And so very content at this time, and there's nothing urgent or burning that I really need to do at this point. So
that's one thing I've encouraged you guys to do, is enjoy the journey. So if you're at the soundbar stage, enjoy the soundbar. It doesn't mean that you're always going to be there. But even in my room, I've never gotten to the point where I was always chasing something. It was just, when it came, it came. When I saved up, and I was enjoying what I had while I had it. And then when I got the upgrade, then I just enjoyed it even more. And I see that in your life. You're content where you're at, but there's definitely some changes. And then I guess one other one you mentioned, you possibly might move your rack outside into your
possibly.
office. And,
because it is over there in the back corner, and it's not as critical now because we've changed out the amps and it doesn't get hot anymore. But that is definitely something that if I could get a full size rack, one that one of the taller 72-inch racks, because that's a compressed, vertically it's compressed down to, I think it's about 45 inches from, And so I can't show you the back of my rack. I love seeing those pictures online of the guys who have very meticulous, wiring on the backs of their racks. But that's because they have so much space in the very tall racks. Yep. And so if I do move it into the office, then I'll be able to kind of redo some of that on the back of the rack and make it look a lot better than everything is today. So yeah, possibly, but not a requirement. Yeah. I mean, it's not a distraction. Could be something
down the road, but
it's not a distraction. But there's always something. I mean, it's a hobby, right? Yeah. It's not just a build it and you're done. Correct. I mean, incrementally over time to make the improvements and to put another smile on your face. I mean, and there's a lot of other hobbies that I could be doing that are a lot more costly. So I think that this is something that I've just always enjoyed. So
yeah, we got one last question for you. So if you could give some advice, maybe just one nugget of truth or one kind of thought process to the new guy that's watching this video, seeing Jay's room going, man, I want something like that in my house. What one piece of advice could you give to them? Maybe it saves them time, maybe it saves them energy, maybe it even saves them money, but if you could go back, man, how would you, what would you give advice to them?
I'll answer this very similar to the first video that we did. I think having the room design first before you start investing in equipment and speakers and everything was huge. And that's one thing. During COVID, I came up with this whole redesign idea. And that's when I met, Zach and Aaron and the guys from the screening room. And as I got to know them, what I love about that company as a integrator is that they're a design first mentality. Right. Now, the problem with me was that I already had the room. And so, but fortunately, the sides of the room and even the top, the ceiling is somewhat accessible. And so I could go back based on the room design that I did eventually and make the changes that were required to be able to get everything properly located and get the new wires ran and all of that stuff. So, working with somebody like that really knows what they're doing, that has a professional design facility that can give you all the drawings and, you pick somebody local to repair your drywall or whatever if you have to make some changes and stuff. I think that having the room design and the acoustic plan, if I can give any advice to anybody, it would be those as the two most critical, and then having an in-person tuner actually adjust and tune your system. Because I know that there's a lot of remote tuners online and stuff, but they can't verify what you're hearing. And so having somebody who's professionally trained in person come and make an adjustment, listen, adjust, verify, listen, verify. I mean, that's the biggest advice I could have. And
even to tweak it, because let's face it, some of this is subjective.
Yep.
Like, you were talking about, you kind of prefer having a little bit more bass.
A little bit hotter bass, yep.
So that's where together y'all can listen together and go, okay, if I adjust this, it's not going to hurt the performance. That's more of a personal preference.
Yep.
And so having that in-person calibrator, I think, gives you more flexibility in that.
Yep, those are the big things for me. If I can give any advice to anybody and get engaged in the community of, there's a lot of smart people out there.
100%.
And they're all, they have the same passion, a lot of them do, that you do when it comes to your hobbies and home theater. And I think having that at your fingertips and being able to make friendships like that's been huge for me. So I think it would help others as well.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Jay, this has been great, man. This has been 5 years since I've been up here. It's been awesome reconnecting with you. We've kept contact online and on the phone, but in person, being able to come back up to hear and see and experience the changes you've made, the upgrades that you've done. It's just been super, super enjoyable, man. I appreciate the opportunity.
Hey, thanks for always being willing to, talk and text and for coming up and doing this. Really enjoy the channel and wish you the best in the future as well with your new venture. So.
Yeah. I appreciate it, man. Well, I'm going to leave a link to all, especially the sponsors, man. They're what make this possible. This is like a 4.5 drive. I got another 4.5 drive once we get done, more video to film, B-roll, but that's what allows me to do what I do. And so super a shout out to them. But I'll leave links to all of their information down in the description. So definitely show them some love. Check out their stuff. If you need a calibrator, if you need some amplifiers, if you need a room design, if you need a hush box, these guys definitely would appreciate your support. And so definitely show them some love. But anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Have a great week. God bless, and we'll catch you in the next one.